Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so I didn't mean to make these last two episodes a double feature. I actually recorded the previous one like a week ago or so. But I kept forgetting to upload it. I kept being too busy to upload it, so I kept forgetting and putting it off. So yeah, they're both going up today. So there you go. You can just if you want to know what the final two episodes are, those are there. But in case this episode is the series finale. It's the third part of the series 3-part finale. And it is kind of one of the kind of does raise the stakes for what the series has been. It is kind of like the kind of be all end of the series where Mystery Incorporated just kind of faces their most powerful threat they faced thus far, while also and then also subsequently defeated. So yeah, of course the episode opens up with actually a narration by Nova, who proceeds to go on and she proceeds to give the year of when she kind of makes this announcement, and I forget the specific year she's brought up, but the implication behind it is that the Anunnaki have just been around for far longer than human history has been, and so they kind of have been down for centuries, millennia, however long, but she then proceeds to go on to explain what the Anunnaki are, and where they came from, and how they've helped humans throughout history. Case in point, while she's talking about that, she actually shows a demonstration of an Anunnaki helping the Egyptians or whoever the hell build the pyramids. I don't remember which civilization specifically, but I'm pretty sure the pyramids. They set, it's maybe the Aztec pyramids if I had to think about it, because that was explained to be the first incarnation of Mystery Incorporated that we saw. But she goes on to explain how they've been helping shape humanity and helping them prosper and grow. Every time Nibiru comes around, that's exactly what happens. But she also goes on to explain how one of them, the evil entity, did not want to play nice with others and only sought destruction to destroy their world and destroy it. And then we find out how the evil entity actually got sealed inside the crystal sarcophagus, revealing that it's actually a prison beyond time and space, which enables it to be isolated from pretty much everything else that it could possibly touch. It is literally just stuck in a pocket dimension inside the crystal sarcophagus, unable to move, unable to actually do anything, until we find out, obviously, Professor Pericles released it, and she goes on to explain that now that it's been set free, it's going to cause wanton destruction to pretty much everything around it, and claims that the only thing that can stand in its way now is Scooby-Doo. At which point we then cut back to the cave in the fire dimension, where the evil entity, now cackling madly about the fact that it's been freed from its crystal sarcophagus, then proceeds to grab Scooby-Doo, and much to their fear and surprise, and of course, Fred insists to know what the evil entity wants to do with Scooby-Doo, and it's at this point where the evil entity starts grabbing Scooby-Doo and in its tentacles, and then proceeds to reveal basically something I covered in the last episode of this, and my last review of this, that the evil entity doesn't have a physical form yet because it never had the opportunity to gain one. So, which is why it needs the animal mascots. It grabs Scooby-Doo and then tells him that he's going to become a vessel for it, so that it can gain a physical form and start and gain absolute and become a vessel for its absolute power. But Scooby tells it that it'll never become a vessel for it, and then proceeds to break free of its tentacles. At which point, Professor Pericles proceeds to fly up to it and tells it to forget Scooby-Doo and just give him the power instead. And the evil entity obliges, and then proceeds to wrap Professor Pericles in his tentacles and enters his body through his mouth. And then Professor Pericles proceeds to turn neon green and inflate like a balloon. So and of course Professor Pericles starts cackling madly, proceeding to go on to explain that now that after all these years he finally has the power. And of course Shaggy makes a quick comment about how Professor Pericles always seems to get scarier when they think he's peaked, which fair, but of course he then proceeds to gloat that with his newfound power he's going to finally be able to destroy the new Mystery Incorporated, and then prepares to get ready to destroy them, but then his eyes briefly flash to turn into the evil entities. And Professor Pericles then proceeds to utter that something is wrong, and then his body starts to contort and twist, and a bunch of tentacles proceed to emerge from his body and encase him like a cocoon. And of course Mr. E, he obviously Professor Pericles has been nothing but horrible to him, obviously, this entire time, but of course, Mr. E, despite that, Mr. E has always had a bit of a one-sided relationship with Professor Pericles and always viewed him as a friend. So when something happens to Professor Pericles and Professor Pericles obviously starts being encased in a cocoon, he immediately goes up out of concern and asks the professor what's wrong. And of course, Professor Pericles' eyes then proceed to glow into the evil entities. And when it finally emerges from the cocoon, the evil entity is now in complete control of Professor Pericles' body, and proclaims that the bird is gone and that now it is flesh. And also because of that, because it had encased Professor Pericles' body into a cocoon, it kind of metamorphosizes into this large tentacled mass that has Professor Pericles' head on it. And of course, he gloats that it is now flesh and is now all powerful. And of course, it's this point where Brad and Judy, still very much loyal to Professor Pericles, then proceed to offer up their service to the evil entity and willingly volunteer to become its servants. And of course, it's at this point where the evil entity points out that that's good because it was hungry. At which point, it slaps it with two of its tentacles, and then proceeds to be absorbed inside of it. Which, yeah. So, yeah, at which point it then proceeds to take over the remaining Kriegsstaffelbots that Professor Pericles brought with him, and it then proceeds to tell them that it is their new master, and that their job is to now round up humans so that it can feed, and pointing out that it's still that it needs more power before it can actually fully break free of the crystal sarcophagus. And then proceeds to tell them to actually go off and go find the evil and to go off and go find the mailing kids. But of course it then tries to herd them, and it's at this point where Mystery Incorporated quickly realizes that they need to run, and everybody at the facility immediately flees. But then Shaggy notices that Scooby-Doo isn't with them, and he turns around and calls for Scooby-Doo to try and get him to come to him. And even though that's not working, but what we find out is that Scooby-Doo decides to stand his ground against the evil entity and decides to destroy it with the heart of the Jaguar. And he then proceeds to grab the heart of the Jaguar from Professor Pericles' discarded it, and proceeds to try and jam it into the evil entity's forehead, which winds up bouncing off and not working, and winds up breaking the spearhead. And of course, Scooby, realizing that that's not actually going to work, then proceeds to grab up this spear to just kind of run and get himself out of there. At which point the Kriegsstaffelbots then proceed to charge in and proceed to try and find the humans so that the evil entity can feed from them. And of course, this is this point where the gang actually winds up splitting up. Obviously, Scooby, it took him a while to catch up with the rest of them, but in any case, they start hiding amongst the treasure piles. Mr. E winds up hiding in one of the treasure piles and hides and hides from the Kriegsstaffelbots that's chasing him. While Scooby and Daphne and Shaggy wind up going together, and they find a trash pile. And when the Kriegsstaffelbots wind up surrounding them, they use one of the pieces of the treasure to actually just kind of sled them into the lava from the fire dimension and just knock them in. And that winds up working. And But it's at this point where Scooby then proceeds to rejoin the gang, and they're chased by more Kriegsstaffelbots, and they decide to flee. Where they then run into Fred and Velma, who had actually found a cannon among the cursed treasure, and then loaded it with diamonds, and tells the rest of the gang to hit the deck, in which they do, and they wind up destroying the Kriegsstaffelbots that were chasing them. And of course they all celebrate, pointing out that they think that they've gotten all of them. But then the remaining Creek staff, the one remaining Creek Staffabot, then proceeds to hold them at gunpoint and ushers them back toward the evil entity, and then proceeds to lead them back to where it can consume them. And the evil entity then gloats that now that they're back, he can use them to continue to gain power, so it can break free from the crystal sarcophagus, and then proceeds to try and eat them. And then a weird energy surrounds them and protects them like a barrier. Which, of course, the evil entity, which strikes the evil entity, is odd and it's weird. And the rest of the gang don't fully understand what's going on. The gang don't fully understand what's going on either. But it's at this point where Mr. E proceeds to emerge from emerge from his pile, having found a sword, and then proceeds to destroy the remaining Creek Staffabot, and then proceeds to stand his ground against the evil entity. Telling their kids to run. And of course the evil entity then proceeds to immediately grab him, but the kids don't want to leave him behind because obviously while he has been a bit of a pain in the ass to them, they've been through a lot, and obviously they think he kind of did just redeem himself right now. Obviously for the past couple of episodes he's been working toward this redemption arc where obviously he's starting to doubt whether or not he actually wants to go find the cursed treasure anymore. And now that he's actually found it, he's finally realized that he made a horrible mistake. So, and of course, obviously Professor Berkeley's coerced him to doing that, so not entirely his fault either. But of course the kids try to save him at this point because he redeemed himself. But he then tells them that it's too late. That it's too late for him, and that they need to save themselves. And then he proceeds to be grabbed by the entity and is then eaten. At which point, of course the evil entity, quickly realizing that he's not going to be able to consume them, then declares that he's going to need more fuel than what came to him. And then proceeds to open a Terran space-time to actually bring the fire dimension to Crystal Cove so that he can feast there. And sure enough, he then proceeds to do exactly that. He rips it and he blows open a hole in Crystal Cove, and the fire dimension just kind of emerges from Crystal Cove. Things start catching fire, and then once he's on the surface at Crystal Cove, he then proceeds to open up the crystal sarcophagus. And it proceeds to tell them to summon several evil Anunnaki, which were all apparently sealed in the crystal sarcophagus alongside it, and tells them to bring it humans so that it can continue to feast and grow. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. Mystery Incorporated, they proceed to run away from the evil Anunnaki and go as far away as possible. But the rest of Crystal Cove, who have no idea what's even happening, other than that's a complete state of emergency, are simply grabbed by the evil entity's minions and are dragged to it, kicking and screaming. At which point it then proceeds to grab them and eat all of them. The first of which being the former Mayor Jones, which of course enrages Fred. And of course, the Mr. Incorporated can only really watch helplessly as they see all of their friends and loved ones being devoured. But it's at this point where the evil Anunnaki then proceed to find them, and they have to wind up fleeing. At which point they run deeper into the town, where they are then surrounded by the evil entity's minions, and kind of at a loss as to what to do. Scooby does the only thing he can do, which is to call Nova for help. At which point time freezes. And Nova then proceeds to appear to him. And of course, is this point where Scooby asks Nova what he can do to actually help save his friends and help save his town. And pointing out that the heart of the Jaguar didn't work. But it's at this point where Nova tells him that the spear was never the heart of the Jaguar, and that's not something else, and that Scooby will know what that is when the time is right. And of course, Scooby, just kind of frustrated about the fact that she's not really telling him what to do, then proceeds to insist that she tells him what to do. But she merely responds that you will know, you will see, you will feel, and then proceeds to just peace out. And at which point the gang are then grabbed by the evil Anunnaki, or brought before the evil entity. But it's at this point where the evil entity once again tries to consume them, but it then proceeds to smack it with one of its tentacles. But then the weird energy surrounds the gang again and once again protects them, to the point where the evil entity winds up burning one of its tentacles on the barrier that's surrounding them. And it's at this point where Scooby finally figures it out, when he sees all of his friends together with him. He looks around, he looks at them, and he realizes what Nova finally means, and then proceeds to make a beat to leave, and while the evil entity is recovering, and proceeds to make a beeline for the remains of the heart of the Jaguar. At which point he grabs it, and the gang, obviously seeing him and not fully understanding what he's doing, proceeds to follow him, and he proceeds to bring them to a destroyed building. At which point he then proceeds to explain what exactly he's figured out. As it turns out, the heart was never the spear. As he explains, the heart is actually the unbreakable bond he and his friends have with each other. Essentially, in this moment, it's revealed that the power of friends was what the evil entity couldn't destroy, because essentially in this moment, it's revealed that the one thing that enabled them to find the evil entity so that to release it is also the one thing that can destroy it. Essentially, that's essentially what the series explains. So I'm just quoting what it says. So yeah, they point, after realizing that's something that can never be taken away or destroyed, they then realize that they need to actually find a way to destroy the evil entity with that. And it's at this point where Fred notices that the evil entity is still very much connected to the sarcophagus and seems to be drawing energy from it. And of course he concludes that if they destroy that they will have severed the evil entity's lifeline and link to their world. So with the game plan. But in case now with the game plan in mind, they then proceed to make a rush for it as a team to actually destroy the evil entity's crystal sarcophagus. And of course they then proceeds to go into a bit of a relay where they pass the part of the Jaguar from one person to another in an effort to actually reach the crystal sarcophagus. Fred, of course, is the first to go down. He was the one leading the charge, and he immediately gets grabbed. So he passes it. He throws it to Daphne, who again is able to fight off several of the evil entity's minions, but ultimately gets grabbed as well and passes it to Velma. And Velma winds up getting grabbed as well, so she passes it to Shaggy. Shaggy fares a bit more better than his friends, considering the fact that he's very agile and nimble. Of course, he's going to be able to evade the entity's minions a lot better. To the point where he even manages to save Scooby from some of them at one point. But eventually, Shaggy himself actually winds up getting grabbed. So he passes it to Scooby, who then kicks the remains of the spear into the crystal sarcophagus and shatters it. And this winds up creating a massive black hole that just proceeds to suck everything into it. And of course, the evil entity quickly realizes that it's being sucked in on account of how, it's kind of connected to it like an umbilical cord and can't really flee from it. So he's struggling to get away from it, and he can't. He's stuck. He's very much unable to. Meanwhile, Mystery Incorporated are trying very desperately to cling onto what's left of Crystal Cove to try and keep themselves from being sucked into the black hole as well. And of course, Shaggy winds up catching Velma, but they both wind up breaking off from a ledge, while Fred winds up catching Daphne and the rest of the gang, and the rest of the gang, and then all four of them wind up catching Scooby, who by the tail. And then after pulling themselves onto the cliff, they watch as the evil entity kind of tries to figure out a way to actually get out of the hopeless situation that it's found itself stuck in, proclaiming that this is not its will, it's not going to let this happen. But of course, obviously, it doesn't really have much of a choice, because it's just kind of being sucked into a black hole it's connected to. So it winds up being sucked inside. And then the black hole explodes and destroys everything, and then everything goes white. At which point, we then proceed to see Crystal Cove pretty much completely untouched. But notably, something is a little off, since we actually see the sign here, and it doesn't read, and it no longer reads the haunted place on Earth like it has for the entirety of the series. Instead reads the sunniest place on Earth. And of course, the gang then proceeds to look around, noticing that the town is completely untouched, and then proceed to celebrate about the fact that they've destroyed the evil entity and saved the world, and decide to actually celebrate by going out for pizza. But then they're actually stopped by Sheriff Stone, who proceeds to walk up with Mayor Nettles, and several kids that the Mystery Incorporated doesn't recognize. And of course, Shaggy is the first one to point that out. But of course, it's at this point where of course Sheriff Stone is very confused, but does point out that that's nice to see them out on such a lovely day, and also proceeds to point out that obviously it's that they shouldn't that actually what we find out is that before Sheriff Stone and Mayor Nettles, they were lovers, they were dating, but here it's revealed that they're actually married and that the little kids following them around are their kids, and they're actually going to go to the park to take them there for a nice lovely picnic. And of course they point out that they're in a bit of a hurry because Sheriff Stone's 3 sons have to be in bed by 8 o'clock, while his daughter doesn't have to, but doesn't really have a bedtime on account of how adorable she is. But of course, Mayor Nails points out that they've got to go. But before they leave, she then points out that Daphne promised to babysit for them, and that she's hoping that'll still happen. And Daphne doesn't fully understand what's going on, but then proceeds to tell them that she still will, and they then proceed to leave. At which point, Mystery Incorporated quickly realize that something is off, something is very weird, and they quickly realize that they need to figure out what exactly that something is, at which point Fred proposes that they split up and start asking around. So they then proceed to do that. Fred and Daphne then proceed to go to Fred's house, which is revealed to be owned by Brad Charles and Judy Reeves, still very much alive and also looking like they're supposed to now because the timeline. Because as we'll find this later, but they look exactly like they're supposed to, and Fred is adamantly confused as to that Brad and Judy no longer work with traps. He's very confused as to how that happened. But we then find out that they actually deliver babies for a living now, which they clearly enjoy because they openly brag about it. They're openly very overjoyed to bring several lovely children into the world. And of course, Fred is very confused as to how his parents could actually do that. And but also there's an implication there that the house that Fred lived in was originally supposed to be Brad and Judy's house, and then they never got to live in that house. So yeah. But of course, what we also find out is that the Blakes are there as well. And of course, Daphne is confused as to why they're there as well. But of course, Nan then proceeds to point out that it's actually because they're actually arranging Fred and Daphne's wedding, pointing out that they're engaged again, which of course confuses Fred and Daphne. And at which point Barty then points out that it's a very joyous occasion. And we find out is that he actually respects Fred now, which is interesting. He previously he made it clear in no uncertain terms that he did not like Fred in the slightest. Here, though, he goes so far as to call Fred a superb male specimen to his face. So yeah, and of course that's pretty much the highest, considering that, it's pretty much the highest honor that somebody can receive from the Blakes, considering, they're very stuck up and stuffy, but of course he also points out that he wishes they could find someone like Fred for their two underachiever jailers, which as we find out, all of Daphne's successful siblings are now no longer successful, which is interesting. But in case, meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby then proceed to go back to Shaggy's house, where they find out that Shaggy, much to his confusion, although it makes perfect sense if you think about the character, is in fact a top chef. As we find out, apparently he is in fact a successful chef and has won several awards for his culinary excellence, which of course confuses the hell out of Shaggy. I mean, it makes sense considering how much Shaggy loves food. But it confuses the hell out of him, even going so far to correct his mom, pointing out that he's a slacker and he would never do anything like that. But his father Colton then proceeds to point out that he doesn't buy it for a minute. At which point Scooby, who was watching the TV during this conversation, then tells Shaggy to come over and take a look when he sees a particularly interesting commercial come on, and Shaggy then proceeds to walk over to the TV, and what we find out is that not only is Cassidy alive and well, but also what we find out is that Mr. E has lost a substantial amount of weight, now slimming down to the weight he had in his youth, And they went on to go to found Destroyed Altogether, now called Creation X. And what we find out is that not only are they happily married now, but what we find out is that Professor Pericles apparently got redeemed because now he and Mr. E are now best friends, and he's become the mascot of their business, which is very interesting. And of course, Scooby and Shaggy are obviously very adamantly surprised about the fact that Professor Pericles is a good guy now, considering he's not. He killed 3 people. He willingly let himself become a god, and then proceeded to kind of lose his mind after that. But he's not a good person. That alone should tell you that something is very wrong here. But in case, meanwhile, Velma goes back to her house, and what we find out is that Marcy is actually there waiting for her on her bed. And Marcy reveals that they're currently in the process of she's currently in the process of working through their science project for the upcoming science fair, which of course she boastfully brags they've always won. And of course, at this point, we're after thinking things through and actually trying to figure out what's going on. Velma proceeds to blurt out Schrodinger's cat, which of course confuses Marcy, pointing out that that's not even what their thing is on, and wonders what the interpretation of multiple worlds has to do with what's going on. And it's at this point where she blurts out, where Velma blurts out everything, and then apologizes to Marcy before leaving and going to tell the rest of the gang what she's discovered. And Marcy just kind of leans back on Velma's bed and tells her that that's her girl. And this is an implication that this is something I actually kind of alluded to way back at the start of the season, at the start of the second season when I started reviewing it. And this is something that has been revealed recently in interviews. But the implication here in this scene is that according to the creators of the show, the implication here is that if you actually go and pay attention to what's actually been going on between Marcy and Velma, Velma is gay, and the implication here is that they're dating. So yeah, that's the implication that they decided to go with, and obviously this is something that Warner Brothers Discovery apparently liked, because in the newest movie, Velma is now confirmed gay because now the main timeline version of her is gay as well. So yeah, the creators have openly confirmed that. They openly confirmed that was the thing they went with pretty much the whole time. And you can absolutely see that. They had to do that. They had to kind of bounce around the censors a little bit to do that. But you can absolutely see that as a plot thread. But in case with that, Fred and Daphne then proceed to go to school to ask around as well. And what we find out is that Gary and Ethan are also no longer in jail, I should mention. But Gary and Ethan are uncharacteristically nice to Fred, pointing out that he's probably the best goalie they've ever had, and they are very much appreciate him for being able to block all the shots that he does. It also points out that they let him borrow the van, that they let them borrow his van, which they also point out was very cool of them, and then proceed to pass him back the keys before leaving. And it's at this point where we realize that this white van that they've been loading things into is supposed to be the Mystery Machine, but without its signature hippie paint colors. So and of course, it is without the tie-dye hair paint colors, and Fred is obviously visibly confused as to how this can possibly be his van. But then we hear a familiar voice blurt out that of course it's his van, and then tell it to get hit off his field. And at which point we actually see the former Mayor Jones, and Fred is surprised to see him, even going so far as to call him Mayor Dad out of the habit. And what we find out is because of that it's at this point where the former Mayor Jones then proceeds to reveal that he's actually Principal Jones now, and proceeds to go on that Fred has called him many things in his many years, but never mayor and never dad, and proceeds to explain that he never actually went into politics, but when he became, he also always appreciates all the kids that come in and out of his school as his kids, and points out that he's always had a special bond with Fred. He openly admits that Fred has always made him proud, and that Fred is the closest thing he has to a son. So with that, he's very proud. He's very proud of that Fred would actually call him Dad, and then proceeds to walk off and leave. But not before handing them a weird disc with Mr. E's insignia on it, which strikes Fred as a little bit odd. But they decide to. But it's at this point where where they decide to gather at the van, and it's at this point where Velma proceeds to explain what she thinks happened. As we know, they destroyed the evil entity, but she then proceeds to go on to explain that the evil entity actually had a bit of an impact on the world itself. Going on to explain how, because the evil entity was destroyed, it created a new timeline where the evil entity never existed and was there to influence Crystal Cove. So that means that everything that the evil entity has done and to manipulate them in the past and to manipulate everybody in the past never happened. There was never any mystery teams. There was never any mad guys in masks. There was none of that. None of the things we saw previously ever actually happened, but at the same time they did happen. So yeah, there's some interesting but yeah, of course, it's at this point where Shaggy points out that it's come undone, and points out that their actions create a world where everybody has better, fulfilling lives. But Fred then points out that there's an obvious problem with that, and that means that now it's a world without paranormal activity, and by extension, a world without mysteries. And of course, they quickly realize that this world isn't for them, and that they've created a new timeline where they're basically out of a job. They no longer can do the things they love. They can no longer solve mysteries, which of course they realize is a problem. But of course, Fred points out that they do still have one thing they can do, and proceeds to pull out the disc that Principal Jones gave him. And what they find out is that Harlan Ellison is actually the one who sent the disc, and he greets them as Harlan Ellison, but also tells them that they can call him Mr. E. And then proceeds to point out that he knows they reset the timeline, and that he knows that what they've done. And the thing is that the joke here is that he goes on to explain how, because he's been writing fiction for a very long time, because he's been writing speculative fiction for the longest time, it's actually sharpened his mind to the point where he can actually he actually knows when timelines have been reset, and it reassures Mr. Incorporated that it hasn't been the first. But in actuality, the joke here is that he's the only person who is aware that that's a new timeline, because he's the only person in the entire ensemble cast that was a real person. Obviously, Harlan Ellison, he's passed away now. The real Harlan Ellison's passed away now, but here he was a real person on the show when they recorded this. And so when they recorded his lines for this, he was obviously a real author, really actually writing stuff. So that's the joke. He's the only real person, so of course he's the only other person who actually knows the timeline hasn't been reset. But then proceeds to reassure the gang that there's still mysteries if they're willing to seek them out, and that there may be need a bit of meddling. At which point he tells them that he actually has enrolled them at Miskatonic University, and then proceeds to tell them, and it also explains that even Scooby has enrollment, even though he's a dog. That doesn't really work. But he then proceeds to tell them that he expects them there next semester, and that there's plenty of mysteries for them to solve there. At which point the video ends, and everybody utters their catchphrase before they realize that they need to go to Miskatonic University. But of course, Daphne points out the obvious problem, and that it's all the way on the other side of the coast, and specifically the East Coast, and so implications that Crystal Cove is somewhere on the West Coast, possibly California. But and of course they realize that that's obviously where they need to go next, if that's where the mysteries are. But Fred points out that if they're going to do that, they're going to need to repaint the van. And with that, there's then a fixing up montage where they restore the mystery machine back to its original colors and its original glory. At which point they get into the van, they all solemnly stare and nod at each other and looking forward to the future that they've made, of what they can do to actually solve mysteries in this new timeline. They then proceed to drive off. Well, Nova watches them leave, stating that thanking Scooby-Doo for its success in destroying the evil entity, calling him the bravest that's ever been. At which point, the gang then proceeds to drive off into the sunset, with Scooby uttering his catchphrase. And at which point, we actually hear a laugh track and applause, and it's implied that this series is supposed to feed into the main one. Essentially, if you guys don't know, way back in the day, all the Scooby-Doo shows had laugh tracks and everything else. So this is implied to be a prequel to all of those. It's implied that this entire series that came before the original series. So now as they're going to go off to go and solve mysteries and find the evil entity and find new mysteries to solve and go cross country. That is essentially the premise of the original series. They're going to go cross-country, find a whole bunch of things, go to Miskatonic University, and yeah, solve mysteries like they do in the original series. So yeah, essentially this series is set up as a prequel to everything else that came after it, that came before it and after it. And although chronologically, this show feeds directly into Be Cool Scooby-Doo, which I don't know. I haven't watched that, but I didn't particularly care for the art style for that one. But I've been told that one's really funny, so I will eventually watch it at some point, and I have to find it, so I don't know where that is. But I've been told it's really funny, so I will absolutely watch it. But I guess that's the end of the series. So this episode is essentially the timeline. They defeat the evil entity, the timeline gets reset, and then feeds into the main series, which I really like a lot. And also considering that this also contributed to development being gay, which is now a main series thing. You know, this is probably one of the greatest Scooby-Doo series we've gotten, beginning to end. I loved every minute of this. This was a fun one. It's a little cheesy at the beginning, but it definitely picks up as it keeps going. The monsters are all great. I love the overarching mystery to this. I love how all the characters have ongoing character development. I just love this series. This series was a lot of fun to review, and I'm very happy to have done it. And also, I've requested the DVDs releases of this for Christmas so I can have it and own it and watch it again if I want to. So, you know, I'm definitely going to be keeping the series and revisiting it, because this was a fun series to watch, and I enjoyed it a lot. But in case, that's going to do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this series. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm saying thanks, so be sure to check those out. Links down in the description. Also, be sure to go check out my Twitch. Link is down in the description as well. I absolutely recommend doing that, because that helps me out a lot. Be sure to go and check out my Patreon. Go and check out my the videos linked in the end screen as well. Top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. And also, finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to just, go check out my Twitch as well. But also, if you want to see more content from me, I haven't really done much for Scooby-Doo, but I absolutely will and should. I'm not entirely sure what series I'm going to do next. Well, actually, I do know what I'm going to do next. Hopefully, we're doing a video essay on the entirety of Scooby-Doo, and that's going to take a while. If you can probably guess, there's 50 plus years to review and cover for that. So, yeah, as you can probably guess, that's been a bit of a slow process, but I'm getting through it, and I'm currently on the Scrappy-Doo seasons, which is fun. But yeah, you guys will eventually see that video. Probably next year. Definitely next year. Because after that, after a point, all I have to do is edit it, so it's definitely going to go up next year. But so yeah, in case, and I know what I'm doing with the editing wise for that, so that should be fun. But in case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!